Can we just talk?
Metro FM Talk with Faith Mangope.
Monday to Thursday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.
41 minutes after 7 o'clock. Let's get into this conversation because today the Western Cape High Court heard an urgent application by the EFF and the DA to stop the VAT increase set to kick in on the 1st of May. Many of you have already received those messages. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is standing firm, saying the increase is both legal and necessary, arguing that without it, government could be forced to cut funding to essential services like education, healthcare and social protection. Let's bring in now EFF Treasurer General Omphile Maotwe into this conversation. Omphile, much appreciated for your time this evening and welcome to Metro FM Talk.
Good evening, Faith. Good evening to the listeners of Metro FM.
Maybe let's start from the EFF's perspective, as you've been witnessing a whole lot of play-outs here when it comes to this VAT increase and the budget and the fiscal framework that has been proposed. You've heard from the likes of Action SA saying, no, we've negotiated a deal with the African National Congress. They said they won't be increasing VAT. We've heard it was definitely passed through Parliament. But here we are now, and you've taken this on to go and stop it in the courts. Maybe give us the perspective of why did you choose the court route as the EFF as well this time?
No, thank you very much, Faith. Faith, we fought in the committee. We argued, we put our argument forward. Firstly, the first thing that should happen, Faith, is that the ANC must stomach the fact that they don't enjoy the majority anymore in Parliament. The 2024 provincial and national elections gave the ANC only 40%. It's no longer 50 plus 1%. And therefore, it ought to have known, the ANC ought to have known that they no longer enjoy the majority and they can't do things as if they still enjoy the majority. So for the past 6 administrations, because the ANC had the majority, they knew that they were going to pass the budget, whether we like it or not. We scream, we kick, we do anything and everything. They are going to adopt the budget. Mm-hmm. But this year, they needed to follow the process, and the process is found in the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act, which clearly says the minister tables, and that's section 8.1, the minister tables his budget, which happened on the 12th of March. And then he's got 16 days, then there must be public participation. So after tabling, the Parliament must then refer the matter to the Standing Committee on Finance. There must be public participation, and then the committee must sit. And when the committee sits, the committee must decide on whether they amend the fiscal framework and revenue proposal or they accept it. So you can't do both. You can't say, I accept, but I still have this recommendation, or I still have this amendment. Mm. And that was our fight in the committee when we began to say, you can't begin by reading or taking us through a draft report. That's not what the process says. The process says you deal with the fiscal framework and revenue proposal and agree whether as a committee to amend or you accept. Then once you amend, then you come up with the amendment, what you want to amend, and then you go through step by step, amendment number 1, number 2, up to number 100. Mm-hmm. And then when you are done, you adopt that, which is now the report that must be tabled in the National Assembly.
So that's after it's been sorry, Omphile, because it's good that you're giving us context so we can all understand the process that is involved here. So you first start off with and again I have to stress, it's a budget proposal. It's not a budget that gets proposed by the finance minister. He will stand in front of the National Assembly or the joint sitting and give a budget proposal. That proposal then goes to the Standing Committee on Finance. Standing Committee on Finance will look at whether we should be amending the proposal.
Correct. So the minister stands in front of all of us and then tables his proposal, which is the budget proposal. And then after he has tabled it, it's no longer his. It's now Parliament's budget proposal. And then Parliament will subject it to a committee of Parliament, which in this case is the Standing Committee on Finance. Mm. And then the committee must produce a report, but that report must be preceded by a clear statement of whether you are amending that proposal of Parliament now, no longer minister, or you are adopting it, you are accepting it. If you choose to amend, you will amend, make your amendments, send it to the minister, because you are mandated by Parliament. Send it to the minister. The minister's got 2 days to respond. And then after the response, it comes back to the committee. The committee finalizes and takes it back into the National Assembly where it gets adopted. The process was reverse engineered. We started by already amending the report. So in the process, we raised it that you can't start by already deliberating on the report. It doesn't happen like that. The Money Bills Act, it's very explicit. It's very clear that you either amend or accept. But the other important factor here is that all members of the Standing Committee of Finance, like all, including the ANC, including the Action SA, actually amended that fiscal framework and revenue proposal. It's only at the end when the chairperson realized that actually we've been amending here. There's no, you can't then say, no, we're accepting after you've made amendments. And then he realized that I'm in a tight corner here. And then he asked for an adjournment, a short adjournment to consult, and then came back. That's when the Action SA actually changed their narrative of amending. Because they were saying, we're accepting but amending the revenue proposal. And we're like, no, it doesn't happen like that. You can't accept and amend. And then they say, okay, we're accepting but recommending. But your recommendation is non-binding. And the argument actually we're putting in court, Faith, is that the Minister of Finance was deceitful to the Action SA. Why? Because the Action SA says, we are amending we're accepting provided that you will not increase the VAT. After our negotiations, even Afal Trollip said that in his press
Herman
conference.
Mashaba was saying that with me. He came to the studio and he said, we said to him, we will accept provided that we're accepting that there's no VAT increase. Absolutely.
But the minister in his reply, David, that is a court, the minister in court, let alone what he said out anyway, in court, he says, no, I was very clear from the beginning that I can't amend. I'm empowered by the VAT Act, Section 7, Subsection 4, which clearly says that I can put an alteration to the rate of the VAT and also put a date. When you read Section 7, Subsection 4, it gives the minister those powers. Therefore, I could not have misled the Action SA, which Action SA then went to go and mislead Bosa and mislead Rice Mzansi to agree to the recommendations. So our argument in court is that the decision arrived at by Parliament. You can call it confusion, you as the court, because the justice asked, do you call it deceit or do you call it confusion? You can call it confusion, but we call it deceit. And because the report was produced through a deceitful process, you can't use public power to deceive and arrive at a conclusion, which is completely wrong because you use public power. And that is our argument precisely, because here we arrived where we are, and we engaged them. We even read that law, Section 8, Subsection 4, that says that you can only do two things, amend or accept. But they refused to listen because why? They already agreed there with the ANC and were saying, but that's not how you arrived at with the law. The law can't allow that to happen.
Sure. Yeah, Omphile, there's a lot of us to dissect. I know that many people have got questions around this because, as I said earlier on, we've been getting messages and we've been inundated with messages saying that on the 1st of May, VAT will be increasing by 0.5%. And of course, we've got the Treasurer General. I need to go pay some bills very quickly, but we'll continue with Omphile Maotwe, EFF Treasurer General, after the break. It's 52 minutes after 7 o'clock. Of course, still speaking with the Treasurer General of the EFF, Omphile Maotwe. Them, alongside the Democratic Alliance, went to court to try to stop the VAT increases, basically. The High Court in Cape Town, of course, saw a legal showdown as the Democratic Alliance and EFF teamed up to try to stop the proposed VAT increases dead on its track. It was an urgent application that, where we saw tensions being flared up, and we're seeing that, more importantly, you being affected on all of this. And that's why it's important to get context as to how exactly did we get to a point of court processes. That the procedure, from what we're hearing now, is that the actual procedure for the adoption of of this budget, including what if amendments were to be done to the budget, the actual process was not done correctly. And because the process was not done correctly, other political parties caught on to processes that were not done correctly. Omphile, it sounds like, you're saying, is it confusion or is it deceit? Are you then saying that the ANC has always known that it was going to go this way and that it was deceiving the likes of Action SA, Rise Mzansi, Busa? And then my next question would be, were they so not attuned to what the processes are that they were deceivable?
Faith, they've always known. The Minister of Finance is deployed in this parliament by the African National Congress. It does not arise that the ANC will deploy one of their own and not know what one of their own is going to table. So Godongwane sits in the NEC of the ANC. He surely briefed the NEC. If not the NEC, then the NWC. If not the NWC, then most definitely the officials of the ANC. So the ANC knew that once the minister tables that that fiscal framework and revenue proposal, that's it. You need a legal process to change that, which is why we are now in Parliament, in court, trying to seek relief from court to say, court, please hold this thing. One, this thing was arrived at through deceit. Two, this thing was arrived at illegally, unconstitutionally, and unprocedurally. And it found itself being voted for into what we find today. We even wrote to the Speaker and elected the Speaker, which is what we argued in court. And the Speaker could not respond today. The Speaker actually, by the way, Faith, agreed with us that the lawyer that was representing Parliament says that on the agenda of the day in question, when we were voting, I think it was the 1st of April, she says there was never an agenda item. You must go and look for that list that says we are now amending or accepting. She says the agenda was to adopt the report. But you can't arrive at the report before having a clear statement, which is stipulated in the Money Bills Amendment Provision Matters Related Act, that you first need to deal with a clear statement whether you are amending or accepting. Once you agree once the question has been put on the table, then you can move to the next step. If you accept it, you accept it in its totality. Can't accept and say, but I'm recommending. Those recommendations, even now, the minister is saying, but those things are non-binding. He's right. And Action SA should sit with an egg on their face. Because they and our point precisely, and I'm making this very clear, and I want to emphasize this, because public power should not be procured through deceitful means. And that's what we saw, right, in this case. And that's our argument, a very strong argument in court.
Will we see, the matter now is in court. And at the back of, I think, every South African is, Omphile, we are getting these messages, which we are. I think you are too. South Africans are getting these messages saying on the 1st of May, VAT will be increased by 0.5%. So what Action SA says, what the African National Congress is saying, ultimately it's what the banks are saying to us, what insurance companies are saying to us, that VAT will be increased by 0.5% and we need to be prepared for that. Yes. Are you anticipating, as well as EFF, that indeed VAT will increase, or are you anticipating that the courts, because of the way that you say that this particular budget was arrived at in itself was deceitful, that the courts will then act in your favor because procedurally the processes were not followed this time, that on the basis that the processes were not followed, that at least you will have a halt? Or are we anticipating, Omphile, that on the 1st, VAT indeed will kick in and all of this hullabaloo we've been going back and forth about, it is completely irrelevant? People will sit with eggs on their faces and VAT will be there.
Say, on the 1st of May, if the EFF did not go to court, on the 1st of May, you were going to get a VAT increase. I've received a couple of messages, FNB, the phones, everything. So, as things stand now, 1st of May, VAT is increasing. But we were in court today to halt that VAT increase. we've made our case very strong. The court said we should gather again next week, Tuesday, on the 29th of April. They will hand over the judgment. We are hopeful that the court will rule in our favor and the VAT will be halted. And by halting the VAT, it means that the court is saying, Finance Committee, so Standing Committee on Finance, go and do the right thing. It doesn't mean that you have to infringe on other people's rights. You still have to follow the law. And where do we find that law? We find that law in the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Matters Related Act, which clearly stipulates what needs to happen after the tabling of the report. But we are saying to South Africans, we are saying to the listeners of Metro FM, we think we've got a strong case as the EFF. We've put up a big fight, and we've demonstrated in court that, one, the report was arrested unprocedurally, illegally, unconstitutionally. Secondly, the minister acted in deceit, and we can't therefore we can't use public power to procure to be procured through deceitful means. We can't. Number three, we are saying it will be detrimental to poor South Africans if the VAT was to be increased on the 1st of May. And we've demonstrated that. And our point actually is, even in the report itself, it says there's going to be an inequality balance. But Parliament failed to do that exercise of taking the inequality balance. So why would Parliament say this is going to affect the poor more than the rich, but still go ahead and still do it? It's not allowed by the law. You can't do that. You can't infringe on other people's rights. And that's why we brought in the Bill of Rights, to say this actually infringes on the Bill of Rights, because it's going to affect the poor more than the rich. And that is our argument that we put. So our argument is very, very strong. We understand the argument of the DA of saying, actually the minister, with the current law, the VAT Act, Section 7, Subsection 4, gives them the right to do that. Our point is, it's actually a timing issue. So if we were to be in the shoes of the DA, we would actually argue that if the minister wants to increase the VAT, because currently, Faith, it says the minister can put up a date like he did. He says 1st of May. But only then bring the amendment, the revenue amendment bill, 12 months, within 12 months. Meaning what? Meaning that because the VAT is going up on the 1st of May, the minister can wait until December and bring the amendment that affects that 0.5. So you would have collected VAT illegally throughout. Our submission as the EFF is to say, let's amend that if we have to, and say that the minister must table that during the medium-term budget policy statement, which happens September, October, and say, 6 months later, I'm going to increase VAT. And then we go through that process of amending that revenue amendment bill, which becomes a subject of Parliament, which gets voted into Parliament. Because even if we were to say, the minister must drop it now, there's no legal basis. He must bring him again. So we're at his mercy here. The minister is increasing now 1st of May without anything on the table. And he's going to table whatever, even if you make noise, me and you, and say, no, minister, make it 3%, or the Parliament will eventually vote for a 0.3%, the minister will have collected 0.5% all along. And it's not going to give you and me a refund. And that was the argument of the DA to say, how are you going to calculate the refunds? Because that cuts across everything. It's unlike in the issue of the e-tolls. When you are passing the e-tolls in Gauteng, they made a case like reference to the case. Yes, where you know that you pass 20 times, so you can link it. But how are you going to link it to an orange, to onion, to juice, to bread, to pap, to rice? You can't. So you are actually collapsing the state. Therefore, hold the VAT increase. But in its current form, you ought to then hold or set aside that report that was voted for in Parliament, which we are saying it was unprocedural, and we've given the reasons why. And the Speaker, who was informed the night before, who still went ahead with that report, today concedes in court that you are right. There was never a provision for the arrival of the clear statement of whether you are amending or accepting. Therefore, the EFF is correct. But that was never put on the table, because that's our argument. It was never put to the table. The question was never put on the table. Are you amending? Are you accepting? The Speaker says, yes, you are right, because it was not in the agenda. So what were you dealing with?
If you did not even have the agenda in itself. Omphile, I've got a very quick question from Andile. I want Andile to be able to ask the question, then we can refer to you to answer. Andile from the Eastern Cape, good evening.
Good evening, Faith. If you can recall, Faith, Mr. Mashaba was in the studio with you, where actually I asked him what kind of assurance does he have for the South Africans around the demands that he claimed about the VAT from ANC. Because of the fact that, as we hear right now, that the ANC has deliberately deceived everyone, Action SA and other political parties. So from EFF, so I would like to hear, and then what would be the ultimate goal that you want to achieve by taking ANC to court?
That is a very good question there, Andile. Maybe it will be this time the Ministry of Finance, because it's the Minister of Finance that tables the budget. But Omphile, that is a good question in terms of what would be the end goal by taking this particular budget to court. Is it just to put a halt on VAT, and will it affect now the rest of the budget proposal that has been put forward? How does it work? Do we only stop VAT, but everything else can continue where expenditure is concerned and revenue is concerned on that part?
Not necessarily. You can still remember, once we are dealing with the fiscal framework and the revenue proposals, and then the next process is to deal with appropriations, which the appropriations committee was actually sitting today. They could not vote on it. You can still propose that, okay, you are saying the budget of agriculture is this much, and then the budget of health is this much. No, let's actually turn it around. Let's give health 15 rand, let's give agriculture 5 rand. So you can still do that. It's still coming, that process. As a result, today, as I'm speaking to you, while we're in court, Appropriation Committee could not adopt the appropriation of revenue, the division of revenue bill, which is going to be voted for on the 6th of May, 2025. But with the court, should the court rule in our favor, it will mean that the Standing Committee on Finance must go back and follow the process. And following the process, now that Action SA, Bosa and Rice Mzansi, they do know and understand that they were not dealing at that time with the revenue, division of revenue bill, because that's what they voted for. If you remember, Musa Maimane on the podium there in Parliament was saying, yeah, the very same people, we need to give them budget. Dude, we're not voting for the budget, we're voting for the fiscal framework now. The budget comes during the appropriation process, which is a separate process after this one, because that appropriation and revenue proposals, they have to follow through from the fiscal framework. So you can't, as a minister, for example, introduce VAT during the fiscal framework and revenue proposal, but when it comes to the implementation, you say, that thing was VAT, I was mistaken, man, let's just leave it. It has to follow some form of a framework. That framework is what we voted for. Now, that's what they did not understand, that it's in the fiscal framework, and then the fiscal framework gives effect to the actual budget, because those calculations, those monies that we are appropriating come from the revenue proposals that have been tabled by the minister. The minister can't table something when he doesn't know where he's going to get that money from, and that's where the revenue proposal comes in. So if the court rules in our favor, it goes back to the SCOF, and then SCOF must finalize and go back, restart the process. It will be interesting, Faith, now to see if Action SA will still vote in favor of that, now that they know that you could not have accepted and amended. Like they should be knowing by now.
You have to amend and then accept. You can't accept, then amend. Because if you accept, it means you're accepting the whole thing in its entirety. But if you're saying, no, I'm amending, that means that you have not accepted it, and therefore you can still amend. I'm getting it.
Correct.
One of these days, we're getting it. We're getting an understanding. I'm getting a lesson in Parliament. We're getting a lesson in Standing Committee on Finance. And it's at the end of the day, it's about South Africans. And I think that needs to be obviously at the center of the focus here is that it's about South Africans and how this will affect the South Africans' pockets. It's one thing to be caught up in the technicalities of governance, but we need to know how you guys are governing so that we understand what we're in for as the country. It's important for the Republic to understand how their budget is being tabled. And what we're saying here is that it sounds like they thought that they had to amend, they needed to accept first. Meanwhile, you can't, when you've accepted, then come back and amend, because they will hold you on that and say, but you've already accepted it. Well, everything else is a recommendation. And a recommendation, once you've accepted, is non-binding.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Omphile, much appreciated. I'm sure we're going to speak again after we find out the results next week, Tuesday, and see where we are, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it is about the lives of South Africans. But much appreciated for your time this evening.
Thank you so much, Faith, and have a good evening. Treasurer
General of the EFF, Omphile Maotwe. It's good that we get explanations of this nature, because it helps us understand clearly in terms of the procedural framework or the procedures that are dealt with when it comes to accepting a fiscal framework that then comes into a budget, and when are the amendments done and when is the acceptance done. And what is more interesting is how it's going to pan out in court. I look forward to that. I'm sure many of you do, because I bet you you have been receiving the messages on the 1st of May that 0.5%. At least the banks are telling you this. My properties are telling you this. Insurance companies have been telling you this. Hey, all the bills that you're supposed to be paying have been telling you that on the 1st of May, VAT increases. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out in court. 9 after 8 o'clock. Let's get into our after 8 conversation. So let's breathe this one out. And after 8 this evening, let's look at how is it that informal settlements are established in South Africa.
Can we just talk?
Metro FM Talk with Faith Mangope.
Monday to Thursday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m.